Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, December the 19th, 2024. Today I want to talk a little bit about Justin Trudeau. Some say that he is now on the brink of resignation. His Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, resigned, and now there's big pressure on him. So this is something I want to consider in this video. Now, it's possible by the time you watch this video, he's already resigned, but I'm assuming that he's still Prime Minister as I make this video. I sort of check the news just before recording just to make sure he was still in office. So far he's still Prime Minister, and that's what I want to look at. If I've got time, I also want to consider the aspect between the Sun and Neptune. And, you know, this aspect was exact yesterday, this square between the Sun and Neptune. I certainly want to consider one event that took place under its influence, and that was the assassination of the Russian general Igor Kirillov, who was killed, I think, on Tuesday morning. He was blown up by someone who looks as if they were paid for by the Ukrainians. There's a story that the Ukrainians had hired someone and had offered him $100,000 or euros or whatever, but apparently he's been detained. But I do certainly want to look at that assassination, and I kind of want to look at, if possible, some other events taking place when the Sun was square Neptune on previous occasions, and perhaps a couple of Sun square Neptune people. I mean, this is in a way a continuation of what I was talking about yesterday, but yesterday I ran out of time. Anyway, before I look at Justin Trudeau and Igor Kirillov, I want to consider what's happening today in terms of the astrology and the I Ching, remembering that today is Thursday, December the 19th. As always, I have to ask that if you're not subscribed, I would be very grateful if you were to subscribe, assuming you enjoy this video, and also I'd be very grateful if you were to like this video. Anyway, let's look at what's happening today. These are the positions of the planets at noon today, Thursday, December the 19th, set for New York. Now, the moon is still in Leo, so moon is in Leo all day. Okay, it's just possible that, if you're in California or Hawaii or Alaska, the very, very end of the day, the moon might creep into Virgo, but I'm going to assume that it's a moon in Leo day for everyone. And the moon, while it's moving through Leo, it makes an opposition of Venus, and it makes a sextile to Jupiter, and then it makes a square to Uranus. So, in fact, there's not a great deal happening over the course of the day. There don't seem to be any major aspects involving non-lunar bodies, which don't involve the moon. And so, moon opposition Venus, I mean, that aspect, the beginning of the day is probably quite mild, but I mean, when you've got Moon Venus hard aspects, it can represent overdoing something, particularly overdoing expenditure or generosity. So that is a possibility. Also, moon sextile Jupiter. The moon sextile Jupiter comes right after moon opposition Venus, and this is a reminder that Venus and Jupiter are in trine. I'll be talking about that in a moment. So moon sextile Jupiter, fortunate aspect, things work well, things run smoothly, and which is not quite the same as what we have with moon square Uranus. So there is moon square Uranus. A moon square Uranus can be a bit troubling. Moon in Leo, fixed sign. Uranus in Taurus, fixed sign. There's a certain sense of stubbornness, not wanting to move. And if we feel that we're being pressurized, we might react or even overreact. So it's important not to allow things to get too dramatic with that moon square Uranus. Now, Venus and Jupiter are making a trine aspect. Now, that Venus-Jupiter trine is exact tomorrow. So there's a temptation to sort of ignore the Venus-Jupiter trine because it's exact tomorrow, it's not exact today. But really, it's pretty close, that Venus-Jupiter trine. And Venus and Jupiter are the benefics. Jupiter is a greater benefic, Venus is a lesser benefic. And so when they're trine, things work well. And it's also great that the moon is sextile Jupiter. So Venus-Jupiter is optimistic. And, we can see the best in things. And, it might be a time for enjoying ourselves and perhaps making other people feel good about themselves. Yeah, it is a good day for being generous. Of course, we don't want to overdo our generosity. It needn't be financial generosity. We can be generous with our time, and we can perhaps help people look at things from their point of view. Maybe someone needs some encouragement or some enthusiasm. So I think that Venus-Jupiter trine should be quite helpful today. And of course, tomorrow it's even closer. And I think tomorrow I'll probably look in detail at that Venus-Jupiter trine. But today I just want us all to be very aware that it is in existence. And really, that's about it. So, just quickly looking at the situation if we set it for noon in Sydney, Australia, being representative of Australasia, and the moon is just earlier in the sign. I think that if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's going to be more about moon opposition Venus, moon sextile Jupiter. I think that moon opposition Venus, there is a temptation to overdo things. Don't be too generous. And moon sextile Jupiter, moon sextile Jupiter, everyone gets moon sextile Jupiter today, but I think if you're in Australasia, that moon sextile Jupiter is particularly strong, and so there might be a certain sense of overindulgence and thinking the best, and so that's a possibility there if you're in Australasia. Turning to the heliocentric picture, so this puts obviously the sun at the center of the solar system. Sometimes gives us a different view, and we can see that Mercury is at 3 degrees Virgo heliocentrically. So that means that there is a sort of a mild Mercury-Pluto quincunx going on. So, I suppose that is about how we're trying to explain ourselves. And sometimes when we try to explain ourselves, it might not be particularly easy. It might be that we just are tempted to hold something back because we're afraid of the consequences. And so there might be a little bit of fear and uneasiness there with that Mercury quincunx Pluto. But there is always a way of telling people what's on our mind, always a way. And perhaps we have to find that way. And at the same time, we have Earth square Neptune. Now, we had Sun square Neptune yesterday. So today we've got Earth square Neptune. So the Sun geocentrically is always opposite the Earth heliocentrically. So heliocentrically, the Earth is at 2817 Gemini, moving to that square of Neptune. And that's a reminder that the Neptune influence, it remains very strong today. And with Earth square Neptune, there is still a sense of uncertainty, and like we had with Sun square Neptune, and things can just happen. And the Earth represents our planet, it's where we are, and so from the Sun's perspective we see the Earth and Neptune being square, and that can be quite a difficult and confusing aspect. And I suppose it's also an aspect that can represent disasters. I mean, disasters not necessarily affecting us. I mean, in fact, not at all affecting us in most cases. It's more the kind of disaster that hits the news. I mean, you could say that from a Russian perspective, that the killing of the general Igor Kirillov, well, that was under Sun square Neptune, which is the same as Earth square Neptune. These kind of things happen when the Sun is square Neptune or the Earth is square Neptune. It's really the same thing. So don't think that the Neptune influence is over, and this Earth square Neptune is still very much with us. And I think that's pretty much all I want to say about the heliocentric picture. So, one thing. Venus square Pluto. Venus was square Pluto yesterday. It's square Pluto again today. I think the Venus square Pluto is even closer today. So continuing with what I was saying yesterday, it's about relationships, not necessarily personal relationships. It could be the relationships between governments, or the relationships between governments and the people they try to rule. And it, I suppose to an extent, can be about propaganda. It can be about images. The images we're trying to create, the images that we're trying to get people to believe in. And Venus, I suppose, is also about money, isn't it? We've got issues with interest rates. I mean, I'm making this video, although I'm doing this video for Thursday, I'm making this video on Wednesday, and I'm actually doing it on Wednesday morning, and there's going to be some news out about interest rates in the US, and so that's what's happening with Venus square Pluto. Venus is about money, and government's money, public money, and so Venus square Pluto, we're trying to manipulate things with financial announcements and trying to create financial impressions. Anyway, I think that the interest rate decision is pretty expected. I think they're expected to reduce interest rates a bit, but we'll have to see. So anyway, that's it heliocentrically, and now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, December the 19th, 2024. Aries. Aries, the moon continues moving through Leo, and it's a day when you want to be free. You want to do whatever you want to do. You don't want to have any restriction. And I think that having your options open is going to be important to you. I mean, that's always important for Aries, but I think today in particular, it is going to matter. But I don't think that means that you're going to be an entirely free spirit. There are things to consider, and you have to perhaps consider the implications of your actions. And, with the moon making a square to Uranus, that might have financial ramifications. It is possible. I'd say that you could say that moon in Leo is very much what you want to do, what you would like to do, but Uranus might be in a strange way the reality. I mean, I know we don't normally associate Uranus with reality, but it just could be that things happen which force you to, I don't know, consider the reality of the situation. And it may be about money. Maybe you've made some assumptions about money and you thought that money wasn't going to be a problem, and it is going to be a problem. Or perhaps you realize that something is more expensive than you expected, and you get it. It's a bit of a shock, perhaps, and having realized what the cost of something is, you then have to make some changes. Perhaps you have to pare back some of your plans, and it may also be the case that you don't, as an Aries, want to be involved with money, but you somehow might have to be involved with money and things, just objects of value. Again, you don't want to be obsessed about value. It's rather unseemly, but you just find yourself having to be obsessed. So, that could, in a way, spoil the fun. So I suppose, ideally, Aries, you would try to steer clear of financial shocks, and you'd really today try to do things which don't have any financial implications. In that way, I think it would be a much easier day, and I think that with this potential for being concerned about money, maybe there is also a reminder that you're more sensible than you give yourself credit for. Astrologically, Aries is often seen as the first sign. Aries is sometimes seen as being somewhat childish. I mean, childish, I don't think in a negative sense, just having that childish spontaneity. That's Aries perhaps at its best. You could say Aries is at the beginning of the cycle, being that first sign. Yet, there is something about you that actually understands what's going on. You don't want to understand what's going on, but it doesn't take much to bring you down to earth. You have a shock, and straight away you get it. And when I say a shock, I'm not saying a shock that is necessarily damaging to you, something that is surprising, that you hadn't wanted to consider, but then it happens, you do consider it, and then you realize that, it really is real, and something has to be done about it. And in fact, when you want to be Aries, you can in fact be very down to earth, and today you can at least. And if other people are being flippant and not taking things as seriously as they should be, you can indeed bring them down to earth. And in fact, Aries, I talk about shocks and you being shocked, but you are actually quite capable of shocking other people. And you can shock people by explaining things to them the way it is. And so the shock might be you, Aries, bringing someone down to earth. Yes, I think that is something you can do if you want to. Taurus. Taurus, we have an opposition between the Moon and Venus, and this opposition, especially the case at the beginning of the day, and this opposition between the Moon and Venus might encourage you to go a little too far, and you do it in a way that you want something to happen. Perhaps you want to be happy, maybe you want to make someone else happy, and you do it, and you somehow don't know when to stop. And so there is some danger, perhaps, Taurus, of a little bit of over-generosity, and perhaps you're just indulging someone, and that is a form of generosity. Someone wants attention, you give them attention, and you just feel it's the right thing to do, until you reach a time when you realize it was the wrong thing to do. So don't indulge people too much, because you're just giving them what they want, and you are weakening your impact, and you are forgetting about yourself and your own needs, because your own needs do matter. And it might then be important that you do consider the home-work balance, if such a balance exists, or the balance between you as a private person, you as a public person. getting that balance right, but there just may be attention coming from somewhere, or rather the pressure to give attention. Someone wants attention, and that just actually messes up your balance. So, Taurus, you might have an idea about how you want today to unfold, and then someone comes along and just messes it up for you. And it could actually, Taurus, be quite difficult today for you to say no. Now, tomorrow, we do have a trine aspect between Venus and Jupiter, but that trine aspect is actually pretty exact today. And I mean, it's within a half a degree. And so this aspect between Venus and Jupiter, I mean, is pretty fortunate. Venus and Jupiter are the benefics, and Venus represents you, and so that Venus-Jupiter could be helpful in terms of money and getting recognition. So it's not just about, it doesn't have to be about you recognizing someone else. Other people can recognize you. That is absolutely possible. And with Venus trine Jupiter, it may be that you're moving into a period of time lasting a day or two where you're actually quite lucky. I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, Venus, your ruler, trine Jupiter, even though Jupiter is retrograde. And so there may be an opportunity that is available. It might be a financial opportunity. It's there for the taking, or it could be there for the taking. But you've got to have your eyes open, and you've got to put yourself first to an extent. I mean, you can't just be so focused on other people and what they want that you forget about your needs, and you forget about your needs so much that you miss out on opportunities. And it's possible that you can be paid more for something than you expected. And so if you're involved in any form of negotiation regarding money, perhaps you can afford to push things a little more than you, strictly speaking, wanted to. I don't think there'll be a problem. Venus trine Jupiter encourages people to be generous. It's not just about your generosity, it's about other people's generosity. And indeed, Taurus, you can be the recipient of someone's generosity, or maybe an organization's generosity. They appreciate what you're doing, they want to pay you more money. That is possible. And generally, Taurus, if money is available, now is the time to look for it. And as far as work is concerned, again, if you're working, or you're involved in any kind of business, then Venus is in Aquarius. Don't forget that Venus is in Aquarius, Aquarius is a high profile angle of your chart, and Venus is trine Jupiter. So things do look good in that direction. Even if you're not working, you have the opportunity to project yourself. And yes, sure, there is a possibility that you spend too much time worrying about other people's needs, but if you really focus on yourself and you want to project yourself so people can see you, they can understand you, they can listen to you, that is definitely something you can do. And I think you'll be helped by the fact that you will give the impression that you're quite sort of solid and fairly grounded, and not the kind of person that is going to cause upset and surprises, even though the moon is making a square to Uranus. So I think in general, Taurus, people are going to trust you, and so overall it does look like being a day when you can make things work for yourself, and you can get other people to work for you. At the same time, this moon square Uranus, we can't completely ignore it, because Uranus is in Taurus, it is in your sign. And so with moon square Uranus, there may be times during the day when you are somewhat accident prone. You might stumble into things without sort of quite meaning to, and that it's not just about objects. It's perhaps about what you say or how you respond to what other people say. Perhaps something will happen or someone says something that disturbs your equilibrium, and you feel you have to react, and your reaction just makes things worse. And also, just on a physical level, it's not a time for taking risks. Keep it stable, but at the same time be as ambitious as possible. So you've got to get that balance right, and I think it's a hard balance to get right, because you associate stability with not taking risks, with not taking advantage of opportunities. But you do have to take advantage of opportunities, but you mustn't do it in a way that is thoughtless. And so Taurus, I think it really is a good day, but you've just got to be aware of some of the dangers. Gemini, it seems that you have a fair amount to say for yourself, like yesterday, and you definitely feel that you've got a message and you want people to listen to what you have to say, and that you want people to understand it. Now, just because you feel that you've got a message doesn't necessarily mean you should deliver it. There's always the right time for delivering messages, and sometimes you just get the timing wrong. And today the moon does make a square to Uranus, and so that moon square Uranus might encourage you to say something without really thinking it through, and you get a negative response. And I know that Geminis sometimes like to deliver surprises. It's always fun to make people surprised, but sometimes surprises are not a good thing. They might be a good antidote to boredom, but then what? Then you've got to deal with the consequences of what you've created. So don't be in too much of a hurry, and just because you want to say something doesn't mean actually that you should say it. Now, possibly the main aspect today, which is an aspect which is exact tomorrow, is a trine between Venus and Jupiter. And Jupiter is moving through your sign. Venus is moving through Aquarius. It's an air sign, so it's an airy trine. And so I think that Venus trine Jupiter does lift you up, or it can lift you up. It can make you feel better about yourself, and it can encourage you to think about new possibilities. And so we perhaps have a little bit of a contrast here. So I've just said that you're very keen to say what's on your mind. And think about that. You perhaps have got this idea in your head which has been brewing for some time, and you feel that this idea it's ready. But think about what some of your ideas are. Some of your ideas are actually very rigid. They're like a block. They're like a rigid block of information that you want to deliver. And there's really no flexibility here. And maybe that's a Gemini problem. I mean, Gemini is supposed to be a flexible sign, and being able to deal constantly with change. But sometimes you can hang on to things, you cling on to things, particularly ideas, and you just deliver them without considering the situation. And then we have Venus trine Jupiter. And this is actually encouraging you to take what you have, take what you're thinking about, and perhaps to change it, to give it a different emphasis. And you might actually realize that ideas which you'd been holding on to very, very tightly, these blocks of ideas, almost like parcels ready for delivery, that these parcels of ideas have actually outlived their purpose. They're not relevant anymore. You've missed the moment. And perhaps actually while Mercury was going retrograde, things did change, and the world has changed, and perhaps you have changed. And with Venus trine Jupiter, it's a time to perhaps look at things with fresh eyes, and perhaps with other people's help, getting a different view, and realizing that your overall conceptual framework just perhaps needs to completely change, but not in a dramatic way. It should be done in a slow way. Perhaps you talk to people, perhaps you go somewhere different. That might be something you can do. It would be a good time to talk to someone you've never talked to before, or perhaps never talked to them really in detail, or go somewhere different, somewhere which might be a little bit challenging. And so don't be afraid of that challenge, because the worst that can happen, I think, is that you're just going to change your mind. And so Gemini, I think it's a day when, you've got lots to say, but I think you should be prepared to listen and structure your ideas and just be ready for a change of emphasis, and because rigidity is really going to get you nowhere. And I should say something about relationships. This Venus trine Jupiter, which is exact tomorrow, and I'll be talking more about the Venus trine Jupiter tomorrow, it does suggest that relationships can be an area that could be really very satisfying for you. And getting close to people can just give you new insights. And even if those people, you've been with them all your life or most of your life, even then they've got something new to offer. So don't think that you've got all the answers. And I think that, relationships for you can be something really uplifting. And so don't try to do everything on your own, and just really try to work out what other people have got to offer. Cancer, the moon continues moving through Leo, and while it's in Leo, it does make a square to Uranus. So with that square to Uranus, Cancer, you can't expect everything to just proceed in an orderly fashion. Over the course of the day, there might be a few surprises, and you shouldn't assume that particular people are going to react and respond in particular ways. You have to realize that it's a time when other people may want to do things in a way that is really quite individualistic, and you might not in the first instance take kindly to this, and you might sort of ask, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Because I don't think, Cancer, that fundamentally you're in the mood for surprises. And surprises can take many forms, and there could be some financial surprises, because the moon is moving through Leo, and of course Leo from a Cancerian perspective is quite a money-orientated sign. So you say, well, moon square Uranus can be about perhaps something financial coming to the surface in a surprising way. Maybe someone starts talking about money in a way that feels to you rather inappropriate, or suddenly money becomes an issue and you didn't want it to become an issue and you have to respond. In which case, it's just important that you don't overreact. I mean, not just about money. Overall, it's important that you don't overreact. I mean, I do know, Cancer, that you're quite good at predicting things. You know where things are moving. it's in a way it's difficult to surprise you, because emotionally you're good at giving yourself advance warning, but that system of advance warning may not entirely work, and so something might happen that you hadn't planned for. But don't worry. I think that you have the resources to deal with it, and if you just keep your cool, I think you should just be able to take the whole thing in your stride. Now, one aspect that possibly needs to be mentioned is an aspect between Venus and Jupiter. So Venus is trine Jupiter. Now, this trine between Venus and Jupiter, which is going to be operational for the next couple of days, is fortunate. It's fortunate for everyone, and it's fortunate for different people in different ways. And so the question you might have, Cancer, is, where is your luck? Where is your good fortune? And I think that you can have a fortunate day, particularly as the moon is, it's not just the fact that the Venus is trine Jupiter, the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. And so with that Venus-Jupiter sextile, it's possible that you can kind of discover your own good fortune, but in your own way. You do it in a way that is actually quite private. So while other people are focusing on something else, I suppose, it's a run up to Christmas, and I suppose there's a temptation to spend a lot of time with people, go to parties, other events. But Venus trine Jupiter is asking you to perhaps take a solo approach, to look at things differently, and to be an individual. And while other people are focusing on something else, you can find something, perhaps find a connection, and be able to benefit from this connection, and maybe even financially benefit from this connection. I mean, it's not, with the moon in Leo making a sextile aspect to Jupiter, that does indicate financial good fortune. So perhaps sort of in a competitive situation, if you are in a competitive situation, your competitors might not be particularly well focused. Perhaps they're too busy enjoying themselves, but you're keeping your focus, and almost by accident you can find an opportunity and work on this opportunity and turn it into something that you really can benefit from. So it's probably a day, Cancer, where you don't have to have a high profile, but it's also a day when you should be busy, because there are opportunities, and if you keep your eyes open, I'm confident that you can take advantage of these opportunities. Leo. So Leo, the moon continues moving through your sign. It's moving towards the end of your sign. Okay, in Australia, New Zealand perhaps not. The moon is still in the middle of Leo, but the moon is making progress through Leo, and it is making a square to Uranus. And this square to Uranus might be somewhat troubling. It certainly doesn't gravitate towards stability, and the Moon-Uranus square might be unsettling, but it actually could work to your advantage. And Uranus being in Taurus may represent a sudden opportunity. Something happens, and you can perhaps benefit by other people's confusion. So that means that you have to be very organized, very together today if you want to take advantage of this. So if, for example, you are with other people, maybe you're working with other people, then Moon square Uranus comes along and something happens and people don't know what to do. But I think you know what to do. And It's about perhaps you, perhaps as a Leo, as a fixed sign, you keep in mind your priorities, even when you see things starting to break down. Now, you could panic. I mean, that is a possibility, and you might think that there's nothing that can be done, and you might just follow the crowd, join other people's confusion, or you can be an individual, and yeah, you can sort of take the lead here, saying, well, something's wrong, let's do something about it. And so this might be a chance, Leo, to show your worth, especially if you're in a situation where you have a lot of attention, where people are looking at you, where there are people around who can be impressed. So, Leo, there is a real chance here that you can come over as being a dynamic and impressive person who is not going to be fazed by unexpected events. And the moon, while moving through Leo, is not just making a square to Uranus, but it's also making a sextile to Jupiter. That sextile Jupiter, its strength kind of depends where you are. I think it's going to be strongest if you're in Australia or New Zealand. If you're in the Americas, it might be quite subtle, but I still think you can take advantage of it. And it's just that you're a relaxed, easygoing approach. Even if you don't feel relaxed, you might actually feel quite tense, but even if you feel tense, just giving the impression of being relaxed and easygoing is just going to be very impressive, and people will notice it. And I think in many cases people are going to trust you, because they're going to think that, you can, I don't know, keep your cool in a crisis. That's what everyone wants at the moment. And I mean, I'm not saying it's definitely going to be a crisis, but if there is a crisis today, I'm fairly confident that you're going to be able to take advantage of it. And you've just got to be positive, and you've just got to look beyond surface appearances. And that's part of the thing, because there might be things happening today. I mean, not to you, but just in general, which seem difficult. It maybe feel that one's dealing with a wall of negativity, or even in certain situations a wall of evil. I mean, the sense of evil is there, it's around. And I think, Leo, you are aware of the concept of evil today, and of people doing bad things, of bad things going on under the surface. But it shouldn't bother you. And in fact, you can, in some way, take it all on board and demonstrate that you really can handle it. You can deal with that level of unpleasantness. And again, it goes back to what I was saying, being able to handle a crisis. So if there is unpleasantness around you, then you know that it doesn't affect you. If that unpleasantness doesn't come from you, then it can't hurt you. And so that does give you some added strength. Virgo, it's probably a day when you don't feel that you have to take center stage. That can wait. You would prefer, I think, to just look at things from a distance and to work things out in your own way, and that's something that allows you to look after yourself and not to be overwhelmed. I mean, it's easy to be overwhelmed. We've just had a square aspect between the Sun and Neptune, and I think that Sun-Neptune square is still very operational. And you have the Sun in Sagittarius arguably represents your sense of your sense of grounding, and you're aware of everything that could sap away at it, could undermine your foundations. You're aware of all of that. And so it's a time where you want to make yourself feel stronger and more secure. And I don't think this can be done in a super social environment. I mean, that's pretty impossible, I think. So it just might be a day when you need to make your excuses and not overdo it. I think that is important today, at least from a sort of a physical perspective. There's some danger that there's some activity, but you take too far. It could relate to consumption, actually. I mean, consumption, sorry, by consumption, I'm not talking about tuberculosis. I'm talking about what you eat, what you drink. And so by eating and drinking too much, or eating the wrong things, you could upset your physical equilibrium. So in terms of diet, I would suggest that you err on the side of caution. You eat what you know is good for you, and you don't be experimental, and you don't exceed your limits. I think that is important, and the reason I'm saying that is because the moon is opposition Venus, and so moon opposition Venus can be overindulgent, and in your chart that overindulgence could have an impact on your health. So do stick to the straight and narrow, and don't exaggerate. Whatever you're doing today, Virgo, just do not exaggerate, and then I think you should be okay. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you should be entirely cautious and feel that there is absolutely nothing you can do. You know, with the moon moving through Leo, moving through a low-profile sign in your chart, there are things you can do in your own way, which just won't be noticed. You won't have to explain yourself, and that's always good. Being able to have the freedom to just act without having to explain yourself. Now, you might not be getting any praise or attention, but that's obvious, isn't it? If no one can see what you're doing, then no one's going to praise you, no one's going to criticize you, but you can just quietly get on with the job in your own way. And with a moon sextile Jupiter, I do think, Virgo, today you can actually do some pretty useful work. And finally, I suppose I should point out that the Venus is making a trine to Jupiter. That trine is exact tomorrow, and I think that Venus trine Jupiter as an energy is pretty optimistic. There is a feeling that things are coming together, that things are working out very well, or at least can work out very well. And so this may link with what you're trying to achieve today. You try to do something privately in your own way without drawing attention to yourself, and what you're doing is creating a good foundation for the near future. In fact, it might be creating a good foundation for tomorrow, because remember, tomorrow the moon moves into Virgo, moon moves into your sign, and so that's a time when things can start coming together for you, and today perhaps is just doing the preparations. Libra, Venus is starting to move towards a trine aspect with Jupiter, and this is an aspect I will be talking about tomorrow as well, because Venus, the Venus trine Jupiter is actually exact tomorrow. It's not exact today, but still this trine aspect is pretty close, and it really is a good aspect, because Venus, that's you, it's trine Jupiter. Jupiter is the greater benefic, and so that Venus trine Jupiter does actually represent good luck. So you are becoming more fortunate. Perhaps you felt recently that things haven't entirely gone your way, but I do think that things are changing. And I mean, what you really have to do is really be optimistic. It is important to be optimistic. Don't feel that you can't do something. Especially if it's something that you've been thinking about a lot. You really wanted to get it off the ground and it hasn't worked out for you so far. You keep trying and you keep trying. Maybe you keep crying as well. But you keep trying and it just doesn't happen. But Venus trine Jupiter has a direct impact on your sign. Venus is in Aquarius, air sign. Jupiter is in Gemini, air sign. And, of course, you're a Libra, air sign. So there is a grand trine feel to this Venus-Jupiter trine. And you can... I'm really sure you can benefit from it. And it's just so important that you are yourself. It's not about... It's not about trying to make other people happy. It's about making yourself happy. And it seems that you do something successful and that leads to something else and it leads to something else and you really start to get into the swing of it. And also you should not be afraid of being a little bit experimental. I mean, Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter has been in Gemini since May, end of May, I think. And, Jupiter in Gemini in general has been encouraging you to look beyond your immediate horizons, to just consider what is possible out there. And Venus trining Jupiter is really reminding you of this, that there is so much out there, and perhaps there's so much that you have, so far, you have disregarded it, or you perhaps haven't felt you were good enough for it, but you are good enough. And if you give yourself a chance to do something very exceptional, then I'm really confident that it can work for you. So I'm not saying that you should take risks, but you should push things as far as you can. And by pushing things, that's not about doing anything that is stressful. Doing what just comes easily to you, just what feels right. And you keep pursuing it. And I'm really confident that things should start working out for you in a really big way with this Venus trine Jupiter. And it's not just about today. This Venus trine Jupiter is actually it's exact tomorrow, and you'll get in. And as you move into the weekend, this aspect will still be there. And Venus Jupiter trine, we can be complicated about it and say, oh well, this is new horizons, new concepts, new ideas, but it can just simply be about enjoying yourself and enjoying life. And the moon is in Leo. It's in a very sociable sign. The moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. Yeah, you can enjoy yourself. Okay, the moon is making an opposition to Venus. That moon opposition Venus is just a reminder not to go too far. You can enjoy yourself without doing yourself in. I mean, there's no point in just wrecking yourself, just having fun for the sake of fun and disregarding your own health and well-being. That's not what enjoyment should be about. It's about finding something that is genuinely healthy and life-giving, and then giving it everything you've got, and then receiving the benefits. Scorpio, you are aware that nothing is entirely going to go to plan. I mean, you see that possibility, and the reason for this is that the moon is making a square to Uranus. So the moon is in Leo and Uranus is in Taurus, your opposite sign. And so with the moon making a square to Uranus, there is just that possibility that you have got everything sorted out, you think you've got everything sorted out, but nonetheless, something just happens, and it may just be a case of helping other people. Didn't Sartre say that? Hell is other people. But other people are perhaps a law unto themselves. They do what they want. They're stubborn. They don't listen to reason. And perhaps they don't tell you what they're doing. And that makes things more difficult. And so, however carefully you plan something, you just have to take into consideration other people's random behavior, or maybe just their plain stupidity. I mean, that is possible. So Scorpio, always make space for the unexpected, and don't assume that people are going to behave in the way you had expected. And at the same time, consider the possibility that you can be the source of surprises. It doesn't always have to be other people. And it's possible, Scorpio, that you can respond in a way that other people just were not expecting. You suddenly feel that you want to assert yourself. You want to be dynamic. And also that you suddenly want to be authoritative. You know, Scorpios can be authoritative. In fact, at the moment, I think Scorpios are pretty authoritative, with both the Moon and Mars in Leo. But perhaps people aren't fully aware of this, and you have a chance now to really establish your authority in a surprising way. And it may be about telling someone that they've got something wrong, or explaining something, and just making it absolutely clear that you know more about it than anyone else. And it is a surprise. And this is, I suppose, especially the case if you are in any position of authority, however minor. I think that it is a day when you can really leverage this authority. I mean, so whatever power authority you have, you can kind of increase it by 10. You just, by taking a sudden action, sudden initiative, you make it clear that you understand what's going on, that you're no one's fool, and you also just explain the reality of the situation. You know, some people at the moment are living on a bit of a cloud, and they don't really get it, and they need someone like you to explain it to them. And when you explain things with conviction and authority, you're just immediately taken seriously. So you shouldn't have to be in a situation where other people's random, selfish, stupid behavior trips you up. I mean, you almost know they're going to do it. And so you can perhaps preempt the thing by establishing your authority at an early stage. And maybe that's how you should go about the day, just telling yourself you are in authority, and make it clear that this is the case, not by, just using your power wherever you feel like it, but just it's your attitude, it's your posture, the way you're handling yourself. Just give the impression you're in control, and that you've got an answer for everything, that you've got a response for everything. And perhaps, Scorpio, it's a good idea to just make people feel ever so slightly afraid, because they never know how you're going to respond. Keep people on edge a little bit, and I think that could be a good way of making sure that you're powerful and you're not taken for granted. Sagittarius, the moon is in Leo, continues moving through Leo, and in general that works in your favour. The moon is in in a fire sign. As I said yesterday, we've got 4 planets in a fire sign: Moon, Mars, Sun, Mercury. And regardless of planetary aspects, I think that elemental balance does work in your favor, or rather, not balance, imbalance. All those planets in fire gives the average Sagittarius a lot of strength, and it means that fundamentally who you are is supported, and so you have the energy, and the world around you appreciates that energy, and you can make things move. You can make things move, and people want excitement and action, and you're just the person to provide it. And so, take advantage of it all, but also be aware that you do have a lot of power at your disposal, and perhaps that power can be misused, or perhaps you're going to be in just too much of a hurry. And the moon in Leo does make a square to Uranus, and so that moon square Uranus could be unsettling. I mean, you have the capacity to unsettle other people. You also have the capacity to unsettle yourself. So it's possible, Sagittarius, that you might take something too far. You might get excited about something. You feel that it needs to be pursued. And once you start, you find it difficult to stop. And it just goes on and on and on. And in the end, you find you've created one change too many. And you've created a big mess for yourself, which you have to sort out. So don't be too disruptive, and bear in mind that whenever you disrupt something, someone has got to pick up the pieces, and it could be that it's you having to pick up the pieces. But I don't want to be too negative about today, because there really is no reason for negativity. It's not just the fact that we've got 4 personal planets in fire signs. We've also got a trine between Venus and Jupiter. So Jupiter is your ruler, and Venus is trine Jupiter. So what is any astrologer going to be forced to say when Venus is trine Jupiter? Well, they're going to talk about relationships. And I understand that, or so I've been told, that other astrologers tend to be more positive than me. They tend to be more focused on love and relationships, because that's what people want to hear, apparently. And I suppose Venus trine Jupiter, if I try to be as positive as possible about Venus trine Jupiter, I'm saying that this is a time when relationships can really work out for you. And this is what every other astrologer would say, perhaps astrologers who are more interested in making people happy. Feel-good astrology, yes. So let's feel good with Venus trine Jupiter. So Venus trine Jupiter, if there's any time when relationships are going to work out for you, it's going to be now. And when I say now, I mean today, tomorrow. Venus Jupiter is exact, into the weekend. So you can certainly benefit from other people, and benefit from existing relationships. Partners are going to be there for you. They can be there for you. Obviously, it's a situation where you have to get the balance right. I mean, you have to be there for them as well. But if you want a relationship to work, then I really do think it can work, and I think there is a possibility of finding new relationships. Now, I could be talking about romance. I suppose is possible, but it could be friendship, it could be a business partnership, relationships take a number of different forms, and today is good for relationships. That fact cannot be avoided. And Venus trine Jupiter, it just may be about what you say. So the things you say can have a big impact on other people. And the best way of getting close to someone is perhaps to just talk and be prepared to make a little bit of an effort in the communication department. It's not just necessarily about talking. It could be writing. It could be making a short visit. So if you're trying to give a relationship a boost for whatever reason, it may be necessary to travel a few miles. Or perhaps another person needs to travel a few miles and visit you. But ideally there should be a sort of constant to and fro, sort of moving this way, that way, and not restricting yourself to any one person necessarily. I mean, we think about relationships as just being one person, but I think that there are several people that you can get on well with. And I think part of the key in getting on well with people, with remembering that Jupiter is in Gemini, Jupiter is in your opposite sign, is being prepared to compromise a little, being prepared to give something away, and perhaps let someone else do the talking for a bit. Try to understand what's bothering someone, and letting someone else take the initiative. This is just a good way of getting relationships to move. But this Venus trine Jupiter, if nothing happens today, well, don't worry. The Venus Jupiter trine is exact tomorrow, and it's exact the day after. And when you're talking about an aspect like Venus trine Jupiter, Jupiter hates being taken for granted. And it's not enough to just say with Venus trine Jupiter, oh, good luck is coming your way. It's just going to happen. Fate is going to deliver it to you on a silver plate. That never works. Or, I mean, maybe it sometimes works, but it hardly ever works. You have to make the effort, and also with this Venus trine Jupiter, and I think it's fortunate not just in terms of relationships. I think in general it is a fortunate aspect. You have to know it's there. You have to take advantage of it, but you also have to pretend it doesn't exist. Because if you spend the next couple of days thinking about this Venus trine Jupiter and thinking about all the wonderful things it might offer, then in a way you're killing it. Because you're thinking about it so hard, you're stopping it working. So I don't know how you get the balance right, but somehow you've got to be in two places at one time. You've just got to know that you've got to make the effort, but you've got to just forget about the aspect. Stop. Don't think ahead. Don't plan for the future. Don't try to imagine what good things could happen, because it's the imagination, that thought of a good thing happening, could be the thing that stops it happening. It's as Crowley said, as Aleister Crowley said, whatever you think about him, he sometimes makes a lot of sense. He always talked about the lust for result, and the lust for result can really stop things happening. Capricorn, I'm not thinking that it's going to be an especially active day. Moon is in Leo, which is, for you, I would have said, is a fairly low-profile sign. You want to do things in your own way, and you don't want too much. You don't want too much action. Perhaps because you feel that there's work to be done on your own, and you don't really want anyone to interfere. And I suppose you're also a little bit wary today, I think. You're just wary of things that might go wrong. And so if you try to be too active, then you might encourage negative events, and that might be your thought. And also, you might not be especially trusting when it comes to other people, and maybe with good reason. If you spend a lot of time with other people. You meet different people. You're going to meet different people with different priorities, with different histories, with different motivations. And it could be that some of the people you come across over the course of the day are actually up to no good. I mean, that really is possible. So it perhaps is right to be somewhat suspicious. I mean, there's no harm in being suspicious. And so if you just retreat, I think nothing wrong with retreating, and you analyze things and you just wait for the situation to change. And remember that the sun is about to move into Capricorn. We're nearly there now. The sun is at 28:17 Sagittarius. So 2 days' time is the solstice. 2 days' time, the sun moves into Capricorn. And that's going to make a big difference, I think. So far, I've been quite negative, I think. I've been fairly negative, but there's always a silver lining, isn't there? And Venus is making a trine to Jupiter. And over the next couple of days, Venus makes a trine to Jupiter. And when the sun moves into Capricorn in a few days' time, Venus will still be trine Jupiter. So maybe the Venus trine Jupiter will be something you really benefit from when the sun moves into Capricorn. But this Venus trine Jupiter is fairly materialistic. I mean, I know that there are no planets in Earth signs except for Uranus, but this Venus-Jupiter trine for you is quite materialistic. And it's also quite lucky. And so when it comes to money and material things, I actually think today could be quite fortunate. The next couple of days could be quite fortunate. And things could just come your way, not on their own, but through your own hard work. So if there's something you want and you put the work in, then it seems very likely that in the end you're going to get it. And it's just about how, Venus trine Jupiter is about having the confidence that something can work for you, that you can get your hands on something. And then working out what steps are required to get it. And you take these steps. And these steps are slow, they're very deliberate, and you just keep moving towards your target, and you don't get distracted. And that's a good reason why you should perhaps steer clear of other people. It's not just because you don't trust them. It just might be that they just get in your way, and you move towards your target, and in the end, you get there. And that's standard Capricorn approach, isn't it? Capricorn, the mountain goat. You see these pictures of goats on, I don't know if you've seen these pictures, but you have this sheer wall. Sometimes it's a dam. This sheer, looks like a concrete wall, and these goats are managing to climb up this wall. They do it slowly. I don't know how they do it, but they manage. And so perhaps that's you. You maybe have this task like climbing a sheer concrete wall. I'm not telling you to climb sheer concrete walls, by the way, but it's the way the goats can do it, and you do it, and it seems impossible, but you just do it one step at a time, and you reach your target, and you get what you want, and it may be that no one is any the wiser. So it may be a situation where you have some kind of success, maybe even a spectacular success over the next few days, but no one knows about it. It's almost a private, spectacular success. Aquarius. There are a couple of things going on. So we do have the moon moving through Leo, like it was yesterday. So when you got the moon moving through Leo, it does mean that you have to pay some attention to other people. They can't be entirely ignored, and you have to consider what kind of impact they have on you. And if you try to do things completely on your own, you may be somewhat dissatisfied. On the other hand, if you engage with other people, as I think you might have to, you can't expect everything to work out. And that's because the moon is making a square to Uranus. So moon in Leo making a square to Uranus. And it seems that someone is quite set in their ways. That may be you, maybe another person, it may be everyone. And so if everyone is really set in their ways, then how can you make progress? It could be very difficult. And the question then is, who's going to compromise? How are you going to get a compromise? And it may be that someone has to give in, and maybe if no one is prepared to give in, maybe, Aquarius, you should be prepared to give something away. You don't have to give everything away. Just give a little bit of ground. It might be worth the effort. Okay, you might feel that you don't want to do it because no one wants to give ground today. But if you give a little bit of ground, it doesn't have to be anything which is crucial, core to your existence. Just give a little bit away, and that may allow things to move. And so if you're involved in any form of argument or negotiation, it does have to be handled very carefully. And if no one's giving ground, of course, there's no progress. So if you possibly can, Aquarius, you do try to be flexible. But maybe other people don't matter. I mean, I suppose ideally they do matter to an extent. I mean, they have to matter to some extent. I mean, you're not completely isolated. You're not completely alone. There are interdependencies which just can't be avoided. Yet Venus is making a trine to Jupiter. And that Venus trine Jupiter does give a different tone to the day. So we have Venus in Aquarius, it's in your sign, and it's making a trine to Jupiter. Now, that trine, Venus trine Jupiter, it's exact tomorrow, but it continues to be important for the whole of the last half of a week and into the weekend. And with that Venus trine Jupiter, I think that you're going to be probably luckier than average, because Venus and Jupiter are two very fortunate planets. Venus is, as I said, is moving through Aquarius, an air sign. Jupiter's moving through Gemini, an air sign. So I think that you really benefit from that, and you can be yourself, completely yourself. And I talked earlier about giving something away, but what are you giving away? You don't have to give anything away that's important to who you are and what you want to do and what matters. And there are things that really matter to you. And what matters is that you're doing what you're on this planet for. And that's kind of what you can do. And Venus trine Jupiter maybe also gives you a little bit of recognition. So perhaps in terms of dealing with other people, you give something away, or you give a little bit away, but what do you get back? You may actually get quite a lot back. You may get some recognition. I mean, the moon is in Leo, and Leo is your opposite sign, and Leo can be the sign that you're least conscious of, and also a sign that in some ways you're quite contemptuous of. But Leo is the desire for attention. And perhaps as an Aquarius, secretly you want attention. I mean, you may be very dismissive of it. I'm going to do my own thing. I don't need attention. I'm just going to do it my way. But if you were to get attention, that would be really nice. And I think that's kind of what you want at some level. And I think that with Venus trine Jupiter, you can get attention and you can get appreciation. And it works both ways. You give someone else some attention and appreciation and you get it back. And so that's perhaps one way of dealing with this Venus trine Jupiter. And Venus trine Jupiter, I think, allows you to come across in a really pleasant way. You can come over as being a nice person. Regardless of what you're feeling privately, you come over as someone who is interesting, who is pleasant, who has got something to offer. And so that Venus trine Jupiter, I think, can really work in your favour. And it perhaps tells us that you don't have to do things on your own. Other people can help. They can support what you're doing, and you do not have to give anything away. So that, I think, really works for you, that Venus trine Jupiter, and you don't have to try too hard. You don't. It doesn't have to be contrived. You can just be yourself, say what's on your mind, and allow everything else to just naturally follow. So today, today I know that Venus trine Jupiter is exact tomorrow, but today the moon is in Leo. Tomorrow the moon is going to be in Virgo, and so although that aspect is exact tomorrow, while the moon is in Virgo, you may not be able to take full advantage of it, at least in a social sense. Today, with the moon in Leo, that Venus trine Jupiter may actually be working for you a lot better. Yeah, especially when it comes to dealing with other people. Because I think you're going to come over as being friendly. You're going to be prepared to be friendly. Tomorrow, maybe not so much. So maybe you've got your social work cut out today, and don't be dismissive of other people, and don't get too caught up on power trips, ego trips, because it's not going to do you any good. Pisces, Venus is trine Jupiter, and that is an important aspect for a Pisces, because Jupiter is your ruler, and so we got Venus making this aspect, and I think that I think makes you lucky. I mean, Venus is the lesser benefic, so it's a day when things actually can go your way. They may not go your way in a very obvious fashion. You might feel to begin with that things aren't necessarily going your way, that there's not much point, but you don't want your negativity to block a real opportunity. And so the way things are working is actually at quite a hidden level. It's not entirely obvious that your luck is improving. Certainly maybe not obvious to you. As far as you're concerned, things might at times seem to be a little bit of a grind, but yeah, things are happening, and you don't have to go out there into the wider world to look for this luck. It's right there in front of you, actually. And so do what you want to do. You don't have to go on adventures. You don't have to take risks. The material is all right in front of you. Yeah, it's right with you. So look at what you have, and look at how you can just bring it all together. And when you do that, you'll start to see that things are moving. And don't discount other people. It may be that there's a person who you're in contact with already. I don't think we're talking about new people, but someone you know, someone you're in contact with, can help you out, and it may then be that this has a link with relationships, because Venus trine Jupiter is a relationship aspect. I mean, it has to be, doesn't it? Because Venus is the planet of relationships, and Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter rules Pisces, so logically, Venus trine Jupiter is good for relationships. But I don't think this is relationships just coming out of nowhere. It's more subtle than that. And I do think it's about existing relationships rather than new relationships. And it may be a time when relationships can develop in quite a low profile, even secretive way. There's no fanfare. It just may be that you and someone else have contact, have things in common, can talk. This Venus-Jupiter trine, by the way, is in air signs. It's not in water signs. Water signs are about emotion and passion and feeling. This is in air signs. Air signs are about things being logical, analytical, maybe conversational. There's no gravity here. There's nothing particularly deep, at least to begin with. And so perhaps by talking to people about nothing in particular, even just gossip, may be a good way of getting close to them. But again, it's just people you know already, but you just talk to them a bit more. And you don't have to go out of your way. You can talk to them on the phone. Or Venus trine Jupiter can be about writing to people, emailing them, texting them, or whatever you want to do. That it can really bring you closer to people without having to take any risks. You can be in your own space. You don't have to go anywhere. You can continue with whatever you're doing. You can continue with existing routines, and still it just does work out for you. Now, there is going to be a change tomorrow when the moon moves into Virgo. The moon moving into Virgo that's going to be your opposite sign, and so that's kind of more relationship orientated, moon moving into Virgo, and that might sort of change the way in which this Venus Jupiter trine is manifesting. But when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, for Friday, I'll talk about what it means for moon to be moving into Virgo. And now I need to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 33, which is retreat. I mean, it's not a bad hexagram, provided we go about things in the right way. And retreat means we've taken something as far as we can go, and it's time to back off. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Or I suppose we could say that something is still in the process of development, and it's not a time to bring it out into the public eye. Something is still developing. So the active way of looking at this hexagram is to say, well, we've gone as far as we can, we must move back. The sort of more passive way is, well, let's keep things as they are. We might be tempted to venture out, but we're not ready. We're strong, but we could be stronger if we just were a little more patient. So there really is nothing to be done except bring things back to normal. And if you have overdone something, or if you feel you're in a situation that has gone too far and you're not comfortable with it, then it's absolutely okay to come back. And there is a moving line. The second line from the bottom moves. And the second line from the bottom might indicate someone who is just clinging on to us. So you can imagine that retreat potentially has a social dimension. We might want to retreat from a relationship or from a group of people or from a party or whatever it is we're involved with socially, or we might want to turn down an invitation. But someone is clinging on to us and they don't want to go. They don't want to disappear. They want to stay with us, and we're kind of a bit conflicted about what to do about it. So that's especially from a social perspective. So what does one do? The temptation is probably to just accept the situation. If someone really likes us, someone really wants to be in contact with us, then, well, maybe we should just stay with it. I mean, what is the harm there? But there might be some harm when we consider the next hexagram, which is, because this second line from the bottom moves, that takes us to hexagram 44, which is coming to meet. And coming to meet indicates a situation where someone is possibly being a little too forward. They are being too keen. They're jumping the gun. There's that sort of quaint phrase, perhaps being too previous. Just wanting things to happen, being too keen. And people like that today should be avoided across the board. I mean, I suppose it could relate to someone who is romantic. It could relate to someone who's romantically interested. It could be about a salesperson who really is trying to close the deal and they won't go away, or there's pressure to accept something. On the surface, it seems easy, but if anyone is too keen, then that is a warning. And so coming to meet, we have to resist that temptation, and our independence is important. And actually, Greg Wincook, in his translation of the I Ching, he doesn't call it coming to meet, he calls it subjugation. And it is something should be to be avoided. And Wincook says that we should hold on to our independence for as long as we possibly can. And so that is another interpretation of coming to meet. And so when we look at the two hexagrams together, we have retreat, moving to coming to meet. Clearly, other people should be avoided. And if other people have got too much, we need to leave. And I think ideally we shouldn't be taking anyone with us. I mean, someone might be keen on us. There might be hangers-on, but we need to get rid of these hangers-on, I think, when we look at the two hexagrams together. And we need to really safeguard our independence, do everything we can to safeguard our independence. And a first move is to retreat, getting out of a situation that is really doing us no good. We can see where it's going, and we really don't want it to go any further. And then we have to consider Justin Trudeau. Now, it may be, but by the time you watch this video, he's already resigned. But I looked at the news so far, as I was making this video, and he's still in office. If he's not in office, well, my apologies, but we can still look at his chart. So turning to Justin Trudeau and what is happening. So my understanding of the situation is that his deputy prime minister and his finance minister tendered her resignation, and I think what what caused this is that Trudeau wanted to increase public spending. There was something about him wanting to give everyone a check for $250. Is that right? Or something like that. People earning below $150,000 would get a check for $150. Something is that right? I don't know. And so she believed that this was unwise, and I think there had just been some economic news had just been published which put government finances in a worse state than was thought. And so she's gone, and of course when your deputy prime minister resigns, that's often a bad sign. So I thought I would start by looking at the deputy prime minister's chart rather than Justin Trudeau's chart. So that deputy prime minister is of course Chrystia Freeland, who I've talked about a lot basically in the context of Ukraine. I mean, she is a big supporter of NATO's war against Ukraine, and I suppose that's part of it is the fact that some ancestor was involved in Ukrainian nationalism and was working on a sort of a nationalist newspaper during the Second World War, and it was tolerated by the Nazis. So there is that heritage in Ukraine, which I suppose in some ways she links to. But anyway, I'm not really at the moment talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about Canada. So turning to Chrystia Freeland's chart. So with Chrystia Freeland, it has a lot to do with Mercury. So I'll show you what I mean. So here's Chrystia Freeland. I don't have a time of birth for Chrystia Freeland, but we do know that she is born on August the 2nd, 1968. I've gone for noon in Peace River, Canada, and this does make her a Leo. So she has her Mercury at 5 degrees 16 Leo. And so Mars was having quite a powerful impact. You can see if we do a chart for her resignation, I don't know exactly what time. I set it for 9 a.m. in Ottawa. Maybe it was different from that, but I know it was sometime in the morning. So at the time she resigned, Mars was retrograde at 5:33 Leo. So Mars was on her Mercury. And so this is when she wrote her resignation letter. And she made it quite clear why she was resigning. A lot of it was to do with public expenses. I think he had offered her a different job. He wanted her to go as Justin Trudeau wanted Freeland to move to a different cabinet position, but she didn't want to move, and so she instead resigned. So I suppose you could see it as a sort of rat leaving a sinking ship. But Mars conjunct Mercury, I suppose Mercury is how she communicates. It's her letter. And so Mars conjunct Mercury, very literally, it's her writing a letter which explains her point of view. This is what she did. And she also did it when Mercury, look at Mercury. There was a Mercury trine Mars when she resigned. Again, Mercury was had just gone stationary direct on her Mercury. So it's like Mercury was going retrograde for 3 weeks. Then it went direct on December the 15th. So maybe the last 3 weeks, this whole thing had been brewing. And then as soon as Mercury goes direct, that's when the thing blew up. When she was asked to resign, she decided she was going to leave government. She'd probably been thinking about it already for the last few weeks, perhaps. And so that Mercury-Mars trine was having a direct impact on her Mercury. And so that's that is when she tendered her resignation. Interestingly, she also had Venus opposition the Sun. So Venus was at 10 degrees 40 Aquarius, opposition her Sun at 10 degrees Leo. So Venus opposition Sun, you could say that this is she was in a social situation where she felt uncomfortable. I mean, that might be one way of looking at it. I mean, one doesn't automatically associate Venus opposition Sun with resignation, but Sun represents, I suppose, her sense of power, but Venus, she's suddenly uncomfortable with the whole thing, and she perhaps realizes that she has to go. Now, there were a couple of solar arc directions with Chrystia Freeland. Now, it's difficult in terms of solar arc directions to use them when you don't have a time of birth, because there is an element of inaccuracy. But her progressed Sun was at around 5 degrees Libra. In other words, she had progressed Sun sextile her Mercury. So her Mercury is configured again. And then her solar arc directed Mercury is at 29 degrees 50 Virgo, approximately. In other words, solar arc directed Mercury is moving on to the opposite, the Aries point. It's moving into Libra. So on the Aries point, Mercury is communicating with the wider world. So it's all about Mercury. It's all, it would be so good to have her time of birth, because her Mercury is crucial here. And it's all about who she's communicating with, the messages she's giving, and I suppose she's thinking about the future. I don't think she's giving up her political career. I think she wants to keep her seat. I mean, I heard some people say that she's just going to want to spend more of her time with the World Economic Forum. I think she's connected with it. She has some position in the World Economic Forum, but it seems that her priorities are in Canada. Her main priorities are in Canada. Well, I suppose with Ukraine as well, but not so much Davos. But anyway. Mercury, she's thinking about herself, her own interests, and can't underestimate how much thinking there is here. Thinking, communicating, and there's going to be more of it. I mean, she's not going to shut up. I think that Mercury is going to continue to be very active. So if you're Canadian, I mean, don't think that she's necessarily gone away. But the main star of the show is, of course, Justin Trudeau. And here is Justin Trudeau's chart, and the question is, why is he going to resign? I mean, that is a question. I mean, I have looked at his chart before and asked the question, when is he going to go? I haven't asked a Hori about it. My feeling, as I will explain in a moment, is that it seems more logical for him to stay in power for a few more months rather than go right now. And as far as I'll explain that in a moment. But so here's his chart, and then here are the transits that were unfolding when he resigned. So we know that Neptune is very close to the conjunction of his Mars. I mean, this has been going back and forth this year and next year. So he's in a time when Neptune is on his Mars. So he's got Mars in Pisces, and he has Mars opposition Pluto. So Mars in Pisces represents him dynamically wanting to stay in power for as long as possible, being ambitious, perhaps being aggressive and assertive and keeping everything together. And of course, he's been a prime minister for a long time, but Neptune is dissolving his power. It's slowly undermining its foundations, and this has been going on since, well, for all of 2024. Neptune is now moving away from that Mars, but next year, well, Neptune's already direct, but next year Mars will make the conjunction. So that is an important aspect going on at the moment for him. And the transit that really comes to mind is his Mars. Is his Mars transiting the South Node. So he's got his South Node at 5 degrees 40 Leo, and so Mars is exactly conjunct his South Node, and so that Mars conjunct the South Node is kind of messing him up. It's kind of where he shouldn't be going, the South Node. It's something about the past, and it's also about his connections. I mean that is one way of looking at the nodal axis. So if you've got Mars conjunct your South Node, that means difficult connections. Who are you going to have difficult connections with? And of course, one of the reasons why Canada is worried about its financial future is the threat of America having tariffs. And when we talk about tariffs, it's a good idea to look at the USA's chart. So, I mean, I'm going to go back to Trudeau's chart, but you see, the USA has its North Node at 6 degrees 36 Leo. And so Trudeau's South Node is on the United States' North Node. So, there are a number of ways of interpreting Mars conjunct the United States' North Node. One way is to focus on its wars, maybe the Middle East, on Syria and Ukraine. You could also focus on other areas of conflict, like tariffs, and the threat that Trump has given in terms of tariffs has really, set the world on fire. Canada is worried about it. Mexico is worried about it. Britain's worried about it. The EU's worried about it. It's really important. And maybe the tariffs are what matters rather than Ukraine or the Middle East. And Mars conjunct the South Node. And so Mars, if the North Node of the USA is conjunct the South Node of Justin Trudeau, you can see the connection between Trudeau and his neighbour to the south. And it's not an easy relationship. And Mars hitting Justin Trudeau's South Node has really brought it all out into the open. And so that, I think, is an important transit, and it is perhaps the main transit. Now, there are a few solar arc directions that I want to discuss. So he does have his solar arc directions. What was going on for him at the time of the resignation in terms of the solar arc directions, and with solar arc directions, his solar arc directed North Node is on his Mars. So we're getting his Mars is under more pressure, and I think that solar arc directed node on the Mars again represents his connections with other people. I mean, I suppose he might pride himself on being smooth and charming, but with the North Node, directed North Node on his Mars, and Mars transiting his natal South Node, he's not handling it very well. So his relations with other people are really starting to, I suppose, break up a little. So it's not working as well as it should. And in terms of notes for the future, look at Pluto. Pluto is starting to move towards a conjunction with his IC. So that is really shaking him up. And so that's one thing to look at. And also Jupiter. There's Jupiter, Jupiter at 1453. So Jupiter, over the last year or 6 months, has been making a semi-square to his Mars. So his Mars is, really, really being triggered here. So as far as the resignation and the immediate future, my feeling with Justin Trudeau was always that he would probably hang on for the first few months of 2025. Again, I'm probably going to embarrass myself by the time you watch this if he's already resigned. But I suppose you can resign at any stage. But the bad stuff, the really bad stuff, doesn't unfold quite yet. So let me just show you what I mean. So I'm really thinking about his Mars, and so Neptune has already made the conjunction to his Mars, but it's so now Neptune's going direct, and so Neptune actually makes the conjunction to his Mars on, when's it got? I think it's in March 29, 35. That's the 19th of March. So when Neptune hits his Mars, and then Saturn is moving into late Pisces, and so the end of May, he's got Saturn conjunct his Mars. So this Saturn-Neptune conjunction hits his Mars next year. It doesn't hit his Mars this year. So he might be feeling it, but I don't know. I do get the feeling that he's certainly going to want to hang on for another few months. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to hang on beyond Easter because of what Saturn and Neptune are doing. And we shouldn't forget that from a Hindu perspective, if we look at Justin Trudeau's Vedic chart, we can also see some of the issues. So let me see if I can get hold of the Vedic chart. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so here's Justin Trudeau's Vedic chart, and so using the Vimshottari Dasha system, Justin Trudeau, there's the ascendant using his Vedic chart. He has Mars in Pisces, both in the west and both in the east, and he moved into his Mars period on November the 11th, 2022. So that lasts until November the 11th, 2029. And so from 2022 onwards, things got bad for him. This started a difficult period for him because he has Mars in the 8th house. And Mars causes a lot of problems. It's conjunct the moon. It's not easy for him. So we might think that his political career was going to start to decline after November 22, which I think has by and large been the case. Things have not been easy for him since the end of 2022. Then he goes through different sub-periods, and on April the 3rd, 2025, he moves into his Mars major period and Saturn sub-period. And so, again, that's kind of links up with what I was saying about, from his Western perspective, about Saturn and Neptune making a conjunction to his Mars. So the really difficult period for him, notice he's got Saturn in the 10th house. It's in Gemini in Western, it's in Taurus Eastern. So he's got Saturn in the 10th house, so he'll be in his Mars major period, Saturn minor period, from April the 3rd of 2025 onwards. Now there is another thing going on, and that is something called Sadhisati. So Sadhisati is when Saturn approaches the conjunction with his moon. So he's got the moon in Pisces. So the Sadhisati period starts when Saturn moves into the sign preceding the moon, and it continues obviously while Saturn is in the sign of the moon and in the sign following the moon. So we all have a Sadi-Sati period. A quarter of the time we're in a Sadi-Sati period. And in most cases it's not a big deal. It's just something we go through. My moon is in Pisces, so I'm in a Sadi-Sati period as well. So I should be worrying about that now, shouldn't I? Yes, and when Saturn goes into when Saturn goes into sidereal Pisces, that's when you're in the middle of the Sadi-Sati. Now it doesn't work for everyone, but we already know that things are not working out for Justin Trudeau. So his Sadi-Sati is already not working well. And Saturn still hasn't gone into Pisces, where it's going to have maximum impact. So Saturn goes into sidereal Pisces on, I think, the 22nd of March. I think that's right. And about then, 22nd of March, yeah. So March of next year, Saturn goes into Pisces. Saturn will be in the same sign as the moon. Saturn will be in the same sign as his Mars, and his Moon-Mars conjunction will really manifest. So that's Justin Trudeau. What I'm saying is things get really, really bad for Justin Trudeau in the spring. He could still resign now. He might already have resigned. But I suppose if he is desperate to hang on, maybe he can keep going for a few more months. And it does seem that he is desperate to hang on. So if he does everything he can to stay as Prime Minister, I think he could last a few months longer. But this may be a situation where I'm instantly going to be proved wrong. And finally, I want to go back to Sun square Neptune. So yesterday I looked at the Sun square Neptune aspect, and I considered a few people and events that had this square in their charts, and I now want to look at a couple of events where we do see Sun square Neptune. And the first event I want to look at is a mining disaster, and that is the Pike River mining disaster. And this took place in New Zealand on November the 19th, 2010. I have 3:44 p.m. and it was a coal mine, I believe, and there was a methane explosion, and 29 people were killed. I think it was 29. And so this happened when the sun was at 26 Scorpio and Neptune was at 2557 Aquarius. Now with fixed stars, I don't know whether to use oppositions to fixed stars. I think there may be some benefit in doing so, particularly with certain stars, for example, Algol. So the sun was opposition Algol, and it was square Neptune. Now this is not great. The aspect, the Sun-Neptune aspect, was separating, but it was still pretty close. And if you look at the chart, the ascendant at 3:44 p.m. was at 0 degrees 11 Aries, so Uranus was rising. So Uranus rising is a standard significator of disaster, things going wrong, explosions. I mean, often one associates earthquakes with Uranus on the IC, but Uranus on the ascendant, still, it's angular. It's a Uranus event, so we have an explosion. Sun square Neptune, gas. You associate Neptune with gas, and an explosion, a methane explosion, would make sense. Also, I suppose the South Node was on the IC. The South Node represents what's happening underground, and so the South Node is somewhat malefic. So that's one way in which Sun square Neptune can work. It can be about disasters. And yesterday I talked about, thinking of the Titanic, how the Titanic set sail from Southampton with Sun square Neptune, and it was still in orb when it hit the iceberg. So that's a way in which Sun square Neptune can work. Now, Sun square Neptune can also be about criminal acts, and it can be about murder, disappearances, abductions. And in the late 1970s, there was a German industrialist, Hans Martin Schleyer, and Hans Martin Schleyer was abducted by the Baader-Meinhof gang. So here is his abduction. September the 5th, 1977. And so Hans Martin Schleyer, he had been in the SS during the Second World War. A lot of people hated Hans Martin Schleyer. I mean, I know there's been an attempt to sort of whitewash him and have... But he was a nasty piece of work, and he spearheaded campaigns to sort of block trade unions, and he had a pretty unpleasant history, and so he was a natural target for the Baader-Meinhof gang. And on September the 5th, 1977, he was kidnapped. And here's a chart for his kidnapping. There is the Sun at 12:59 Virgo, and there's Neptune. In fact, there was a T-square. So the Moon was opposition Neptune, Moon was square the Sun, and so he disappeared. And so that's kind of what happens when you have got Sun square Neptune. And later that autumn, there were a lot of Baader-Meinhof gang members who were in prison, and a lot of them committed suicide. It all happened on one day, and Schleyer's abductors responded to this event by killing him. So that was Hans Martin Schleyer, and I think that does show how Sun Neptune squares can work. And it's perhaps also a bad idea to start things with Sun square Neptune. For example, the Munich Olympics in 1972. So August 26, 1972, 3 p.m. That was when the opening ceremony was. Saturn was on the 7th house cusp. Uranus was on the midheaven, and Chiron was on the IC. Now, Chiron wasn't discovered yet. Chiron was discovered in 1977. So people wouldn't have known about Chiron, but still, it was a difficult chart. And not also, of course, we've got Sun square Neptune lurking on the 12th house cusp. And so, of course, what happened was that Palestinian terrorists, they entered the Olympic compound, they held the Israeli team hostage, and they killed a lot of them, and there was a shootout, and it was a big mess. And of course, Israel didn't forget, and they spent years afterwards seeking out the perpetrators. I mean, that's kind of a lot what's happened after Hamas's attack on October the 7th of last year. When Hamas attacked Gaza, Israel did everything it could to punish those that committed the crime or committed the atrocity. And so that's kind of how Israel operates. But so if you're planning on starting something, having Sun square Neptune might not be advisable in the inception chart, although matters are made so much worse by the angularity of Saturn, the angularity of Uranus, Saturn on the descendant, Uranus on the midheaven, and of course Chiron on the IC. And another killing which took place when the Sun was square Neptune was the killing of Georgy Markov. So Georgy Markov was a Bulgarian dissident. I think he worked for the BBC, and he was transmitting to Bulgaria in Bulgarian, and the Bulgarian government decided that they wanted to kill him. So what they did was they sent the assassin out, who used an umbrella, and the umbrella, I think it had compressed air in it, and it had a tiny metal ball which contained a toxin, ricin, in it. I think that's a deadly poison which is derived from castor oil seeds. And Georgy Markov was on Westminster Bridge in London, and he just felt something on his leg, and it was just the tip of the umbrella pressed into his leg, and this ball was fired into him, and some days later he died of ricin poisoning. And so here's the chart. There's the Sun at 14 Virgo, Neptune at 15 Sagittarius. So pretty close Sun square Neptune, and that Sun square Neptune, it sort of encapsulates everything. It's the idea that you've got a murder. It's a very secretive murder. There's a lot of deviousness about it, and it is the nature of a murder. It's done with poison, with compressed air in an umbrella. It's a very obscure way to kill someone, so that can be a manifestation of Sun square Neptune. And finally, there's the recent murder, the murder of this Russian general by the Ukrainians. It was just a terrorist attack, and here his name was Igor Kirillov. Here's his chart, July the 13th, 1970. I don't have a time of birth for him. He was a lieutenant general. He was responsible for the nuclear, biological, and chemical forces. I don't know the precise term, and so he has Mars trine Neptune. So Mars trine Neptune might be someone who's interested in poisons and gas. Now he was killed on December the 17th, just now, which was last Tuesday at 6:12 a.m. There was a bomb attached to a scooter, and him and his assistant, they left his apartment, and that's a chart for the bomb which killed him. And there we can see the Sun is at 25 Sagittarius, and Neptune is at 27 Pisces. So Neptune was actually quite close to the IC, really at the bottom of the chart, square the Sun. And of course we have that classic significator of explosions, which is of course Uranus on the descendant. It's almost as if it was chosen astrologically, at least from a Uranus perspective. How did they choose a time with Uranus exactly on the descendant? I think it would have been difficult to have used astrology to select that timing, but Uranus on the descendant is certainly a classic significator of an explosion by one's enemies, the seventh house. So anyway, that's Sun square Neptune. Those are a few examples of Sun square Neptune, and by and large, Sun square Neptune is a somewhat difficult influence. So that's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.